Today we will hear a talk on steps 8 and 9 from a good friend of the Beacon Group. Let's please give a warm welcome to John F. from Donegal, Ireland. Welcome, John.
Yay! Hi, everybody. Great to see you all again, and great to be back. John Alcoholic, and hope you are all doing well, whatever part of the country or world you are in. And it really is good to be back and see you. I've done a lot of service in this group for a long time, and it's great to still see the meeting going and people still involved. But yeah, so brilliant to see that. As I say, John Alcoholic, somebody's been after me for a while to nail me down for a spot, and unfortunately, due to work and other things, it didn't happen, but we got there at the end, Sonny, so thank you for your persistence, and you're looking radiant as ever, by the way. But yeah, so the steps we're on tonight, 8 and 9. For me, always just, I always say a wee bit like a brief outline. I drank roughly for about 15 years. Initially, alcohol did something for me, but by the end of it, it was taking away more than the price of it, and it was causing me a lot of trouble in my life and causing a lot of trouble for people that were in my life as well. I can definitely relate to Bill Wilson when he talks in the big book where he talks about the stages of drinking. He talked about 3 stages, and I could relate to that. The first stage was it done something for him. The second stage was he drank to function. He needed a drink to function. And the third was drinking for oblivion. And that's been my story, I was definitely one of these drunks that would build the house up and then tear it all down with a drinking spree, And I had people bamboozled and baffled that were in my life why I did the things that I did, why I couldn't see what alcohol was doing to me, and and for me, at the end up, people walked away and left me. They had to for their own sanity and their own sake. And I was angry at some of those people for a long time, But through good sponsorship and going through your 12-step recovery program and our traditions and doing service, I see things a lot differently today. And I see, in most cases, I agree with why they left, and they were right to do it. They were right to do it. I wasn't an easy person to live with at that time. I didn't set out to hurt people, but through my active alcoholism, that was the end result. So I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been in and out of here 5 times. That's my experience. I'm definitely one of these alcoholics that had to become teachable. My first experience of AA meetings, I didn't enjoy them. I found it very confusing. You were all too happy to start with. That freaked me out. What's this about? People seemed friendly and, interested in me, and I was just paranoid and, mixed up, and just a lot of it went over my head, And that's how I came into, a lot of stuff going on. My mind racing constantly with a lot of stuff. Me trying to solve and run the show myself. So as I say, this recovery, Alcoholics Anonymous, was a process just like my drinking was. The issue I faced in this part of Ireland where I am, there isn't a great community of sponsorship or people talking about recovery or steps or program at that time. What you would hear a lot was drinkalog stories, war stories, and just go to a meeting and don't lift the first drink and you'll be okay. Now, I was around for 2 years and I was not okay. I was going to about 6, 7 meetings a week, but my head was not okay because in my sober state, I have resentments at me. I've got fear and anxiety about stuff in the future at me. I've got guilt and shame of my past biting at me, and I'm struggling because I don't have a sponsor, I don't have a program to help me take that edge off to deal with that. I'm restless, irritable, and discontented in my sober state, And I went back out drinking again after 2 years. And out of that experience, I had to ask myself a couple of questions. One was I had to start becoming honest with myself, and the other was, what do I need to do differently this time that I didn't do the first time? And for me, I had to branch out of my area. I had to travel to find people that were talking about recovery and talking about our big book, and help me understand what it is I'm up against, i.e., alcoholism. Um, and that's where the journey started. And also, what helped me was the Joe and Charlie tapes. They started playing the Joe and Charlie tapes, and that was the first thing of getting my head around our big book and breaking this down. And eventually, I found my sponsor, and we talked a lot before we did anything. And, he outlined everything about our program and what it entailed and how we would work together. And he put it always back to me. He would say, now, if you're okay with that, we'll go forward. If you ain't, there's the door. Good luck to you. No harm done. And I enjoyed it because he was he was like a straight shooter. He said it as it was. He didn't nurse you, he didn't mollycoddle, but he wasn't a tyrant either. He could play the two pretty good. He knew when to kind of be a bit hard on you and when not to. That's that's what I learned later on. So we started looking, as I say, first of all, what my problem was. It's twofold in nature. I have a physical allergy to alcohol coupled by a mental obsession, and hence I am powerless, and that I needed to get a power into my life. And he talked about, I'm going to have to make a decision. Do I want to stay like how I was that first 2 years around here in Alcoholics Anonymous? Or do I want to push past that and take what AA has to offer? And that's the way he talked to me about the step 3 decision, and then the process of the inventory, looking at steps 4 and 5. I did not enjoy doing step 4, I'll be honest with you, because it brought up a lot of stuff, and it brought up the truth, because I'm a great guy for rationalizing and justifying my behavior and things that I did in my life, and living in denial with the results of that. And our inventory process, as it's laid out in the big book, takes that away. First of all, he had me looking at resentments, then fears, then my sex conduct, and then harms done. And what came up out of that was I really started to see how I had harmed people. This is where the list now for step 8 formed and was created. It was in step 4. It came from step 4. And me and him, we sat down and we talked about the stuff in step 5, and he helped me to see things more clearly, and out of that, there was a oneness kind of came out of that to try and change, change living that way, living in defects of character, living, being so self-centered and so selfish all the time. I have to get things my way, and he would talk about this is about changing that. And he would talk about usually the opposites of it. We're going to try on a daily basis and practice the opposite of, this self-centeredness, John, this selfishness, this dishonesty that you've lived your life up to now, and how you've harmed people as a result of living that way. And I was like, oh God, this sounds a tall order, But the way he said it, it's a day at a time, a moment at a time process, steps 6 and 7. Practicing or the opposite of our defects of character. He says, we're never going to get it perfect. This is about steady progress, and I thought, okay. So as I say, step 8, then we talked about this, and he talked about, he says, these 2 steps are about mending personal relationships, John. He says, we're in the process of cleaning house. You've looked at yourself in 4 and 5. You're looking at the things that have caused you trouble. We're trying to change them in the 6 and 7. Now we're going to go out to people we've harmed and try and straighten that out. And I was like, oh, God. I was really nervous about this one. This was a big one for me, the amends. And but he broke it down really well for me. And step 8 was really the preparation step. He talked about willingness. Are you willing to make the amends? And he broke it down into 3 categories for me, because there were some people I was very hesitant to make amends to. And he says that we're going to list people you have no problem making amends to. Then we're going to list people, maybe. I'm not dying about it, but if I have to, I will. And then there's people, no chance, I ain't doing that. And that's how he started me, he broke it down. And, so what was it? We're reading from page 76 in the big book, in the second paragraph, it says, faith without works is dead. And he would tell me about that. He says, this is about action, a steady demonstration. He says, saying sorry doesn't cut the bill here. And he went to that reading of the wine cellar in the tornado. The place is wrecked and the fella gets up, oh my, isn't it great, the wind stopped blowing and the house is destroyed, and that's how he put it to me, So he says, we're listening to people we've harmed. You're getting that now from your step 4, and that you're taking stock in your life up until that point. And I discovered that how my self-will and running the show, through my self-centeredness, selfishness, and fearful and dishonest means had impacted on my life and those around me. So, we started to, he says, now, the way I want you to do this, he says, I want you to get an index card, the way we're going to do it, a 3x5 index card. And he says, we're going to put the name of the person on it, and I was like, okay, then get the name on. And then he said, what way did they do it then? Sorry, I just made the word. He says, who, we're going to put who down, what you're making amends for, how you're going to make amends, and why you're doing it. And then we looked at when we're going to do it, and this is how he laid it out for me, and that was really a great help for me going forward. And we also kind of come up with a little script about what to say, So, like, first of all, the first name I put down in mine was me mother, because I caused that woman a lot of trouble. So, I put her name down. He says, or sorry, before I put her name down, when he was writing it out, the who, the name of the people, the what, he says, I want you to just write it out in bullet points, what you did, the harms you caused, then how you're going to make the amend. So you write this all out. If you owe them money, you work out a kind of strategy, what you can afford to pay them back. If it's other things like, being reliable at your job or getting a job, being more pleasant to be around if you're in a relationship and a family and stuff, all this type of thing. Then, I've read out why I'm making the amend. The way he put it to me was, as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm trying to live a better way of life now. And in order for me to continue on that journey, I am here today to make amends to you and to set wrong any rights, or to right any wrongs that I have caused you. And this really, the step 8 was the prep work, getting it all laid out before I went to the person to make direct amends. And that was vital. And that's what the sponsor was vital in helping me with that. Looking at it, and we talked about it before I did anything. And, as I said, the first person to put on the list was my mother. And he said, the way you do this, you're going to phone her up and you're going to arrange to meet. And then on the next occasion, you're going to meet her and you're going to start the amends. And he had me do that with everybody that I could. There was no hanging about. It says wherever possible, not whenever. And so I'd ring them to arrange to meet. Whenever that time came, go and meet them face to face if possible. As I say, I put down my mother. I told her, why I was there, the harms I caused her, like I stole from her. I brought law enforcement to her door. I ignored her when she needed my help. Not a great son, and all that. And then I explained to her how I was going to make an amends. So I arranged to pay off, like I stole, I worked it out roughly about £2,000, right? So I worked it out, right, okay, I can pay you back £50 a week. We arranged that, and she went, okay, so worked that out. And then from going forward, if she needed to go to any appointments or if there was anything she needed help with, I was going to offer to do that for her, to the best of my ability, and try and then be more pleasant to be around, because I was very moody, very sulky kind of a guy around my old folks, This is what I laid out. And, but also then I remember, sitting down and talking this out with her. And then there was like 3 questions my sponsor asked me to ask her at the end of it, And this was the hard bit for me, because, one of the questions was, is there any harms that I have caused you which I may not know about? Because I had a lot of blackouts in my drinking and stuff. And nothing really, she said, nothing really kind of came to mind, she could think of. She was just glad I was sober and all that sort of stuff, But here's the one, she says, I says, can you tell me how this made you feel, the things that I did? Now that opened up a whole different thing. And she said, she was silent for a while, and she turned around and said, you know what the hardest thing for me was? She says, was watching you destroy yourself drinking, and there was nothing I could do about it. And she says, I just couldn't get through to you. I couldn't talk sense to you. It was like there was this blindness over you that I just couldn't get through. He says, that was very hard for me to watch that, Says, as a parent, that, and, paternal instinct was very strong in her. She used to be up at night, at the end of her bed, saying decades of the rosary and prayers. Wherever I was, that I was okay. I wasn't lying on the gutter somewhere or hurt or harmed, And, and also how it made her feel when I stole from her. It made her angry. It made her sad that I was doing this to her. Because she turned around and says, all you had to do was ask me. If you wanted the money, all you had to do was ask. And all these other things, and that hit hard. I was feeling it in the guts when she was telling me this stuff, And the other one then is there anything else I can do to correct this? How can I make this right for you? And she turned around and says, just keep doing what you're doing. Stay sober. Stay close to Alcoholics Anonymous, for it's doing a lot of good in your life. For the first time, you seem happier. And that's, that was where we kind of left that. But the big thing going forward was the actions from that point on. It was when she needed me to show up, I showed up. When she needed the help, I helped out to the best of my ability. Now, I'm not saying I got it perfect, but I did get it damn sight better than the way I was doing before. I started to become more pleasant to be around. I could, instead of being moody and sulky because I had to help them out with something, I could bring a bit of humor and a bit of lightness into the thing. and that helped them. And this went for my father as well. This went for my sisters, now my relationship with my daughter too. That was trickier. That took a bit of time because my ex-partner was very angry, and rightly so, rightly so. And when I was going through this and the questions were her, the thing she put back, she says, "You didn't care, John. That's what hurt the most. It seemed like you didn't care." And I didn't say anything to her because I was guided. When you're doing this, you let them talk, you don't interrupt them, you don't start butting in and saying, well, I did this because you did that. No, you're there and you listen. And when I came away, it wasn't that I didn't care. I was that messed up at that particular time in my life with alcoholism that it wouldn't come out right. I couldn't show it right, I wished to, but it didn't happen. But that doesn't mean anything to anybody, Words don't mean anything. It's action that counts, But eventually, over time, we became friends again, where we could be civil to one another and get on. And also with my daughter, but she she was very young when we broke up. And so going forward with her, it was about showing up. Like I had to fly over to the UK from Ireland every month, spend a weekend with her. I had to go through the courts to see my daughter, all that sort of stuff. That's not a pleasant thing to go through, to be honest with you, because all my past deeds and the type of character I was all threw up in my face. But I was there for access to my daughter. So I went through that and trying to be a dad to her, my daughter, and, getting back into the work environment because, I lost jobs. I fell out with people that I worked with. And I remember a guy saying to me, he says, "You were a brilliant worker, John." He says, "One of the best I ever had." He says, "But your problem was you only showed up 3 days a week." He says, or granted, you do more work in 3 days than most people do in 7. But he says, "Give me somebody who's reliable any day." He says, "That's all I wanted was someone reliable. You were no good to me. That's why I had to let you go." And I carried resentments to these people because of that. You see, I was so blind and living in denial that I wouldn't see my part in it, And, so, but as I say, learning to change, and this comes over time. For me, this has come over time. Learning to change how I am with people, trying to straighten out my past. I owed people a lot of money. I stole a lot of money from people that wasn't mine, that I didn't. And it took, my sponsor got me to, with each person that I owed money, to work out a plan where I could pay them back. I was one of these that wanted to give them the lump sum and go, "There you go, there's your money, grand." He says, "No." He says, "You won't learn any lessons from that, John. What you need to learn out of this experience is a bit of humility, a bit of gratitude, a bit of honesty. Let's bring you down a peg or two because you're a bit too smug if you just want to hand them all the money in one go and go, 'There's your damn money.'" So it took me 17 years here to pay everybody back. And I remember that evening, it was a Friday evening, the last person, when I paid them back the last, I think it was £100. I felt good that day. So I did. Not in a big-headed way, but I had a sense of deep gratitude. For the first time in my life, I'm clean. I'm right. And Alcoholics Anonymous showed me and helped me to get to that point. And a sponsor that was hard-ass when he needed to be and fair at other times, guiding me all through this process, every step of the way. Because when I had read out my index cards in step 8 and listed out all the different things, he would look at it and go, "Right." And then arranging to meet the person, go and doing the we would sit and talk afterwards straight away again. And he'd say, what did you learn? And I'd go through whatever, came up and stuff. And then he would maybe hear something I didn't recognize, and he'd say, well, maybe this or that, And there was like people on, as I say, in my list, the babies I went to, there was 2 people on my list that I couldn't make amends to. As a result, to do so would hurt them, cause them harm, and I couldn't do it. And that was through, and my sex relations, having affairs with married women and stuff, I can't go back and, try and put right to their other halves, what I have done. There was one in particular, I had an affair with a married woman, and she became pregnant and had my daughter. And she lied to her husband about it. I have to live with that. And I remember when we had this done, I'd written it out in my Step 8 index card. And I remember looking at my sponsor across his kitchen table saying, how do I write this? How do I make this right? He says, how you make this right, John? He says, from this point going forward is you do not do those things. You do not hurt people that way again. Your living amends from now on is not to do them type of things. And I said, yeah, but it's not taking away the thing in my gut. Says, maybe it never will, he said. He says, but maybe that there's there in order to keep you in check in the future going forward. Just praying it as well. But the thing about it was, I went, even though like I'd read it out in my index card, I couldn't physically do the amend, but what he suggested I do was take it somewhere. I call it my spiritual place. I read it out as if I was talking to the person, then I burned it. That's what I did in them 2 situations. And there were some people that had passed away that I owed money to. He suggested give the money to charity. And again, I read it out as if they were still living, the index card. I read it out as if I was talking to their face, and then I burned it. He was able to guide me all the different ways. When I was putting up roadblocks, he had a way around it. And he says, no, this is what we're going to do. And I'm glad he did, because that really helped me looking back and guiding me that way and helping me, because at the end of the day, I've got to live with me. I've got to live with me. And these 2 steps were one of the biggest things that has contributed to me being able to live with me today with peace, with a bit of happiness, with gratitude for the blessings that I have, But I had a clean house first. I had a clean house. And it's to say the rest, steps 10, 11, and 12. And another aspect where this has really helped me, the Step 8 and 9, is when I'm going through this work with a new person, a sponsee, and they bring up their stuff, whatever it may be, and we can talk about this. And I hear my sponsor's words coming back to me as I'm listening to them, and I'm able to suggest things and get around these roadblocks like he was for me, But yeah, these 2 steps, it's hard to put into words really what these 2 steps mean for me and what they've done for me. Because not only has it helped me live with me in a better way, but also the people around me, Sorry about that. Brought happiness and joy to their life. They're not worrying about me today. They're able to get on with their own life and their own different things. And I'm able to float around and jump in and help out if I'm needed or if I'm wanted, So great to be here. Thanks for listening to me. And I really do wish you all a blessed day. And Beacon always holds a special place in my heart. And that's it for me. Thank you, Emily.